Ocean, and I'm joined today by Greg Cranshaw from the Secretary of State's office and Kim Kernoyer, also of Ocean. Um, and we are excited to talk to you a little bit about email security and in general, the security of your websites and your email in your municipality. The genesis of this talk was really I was talking to Nellie Gorbea about election security. She and I have been talking about this for a long time, and she's very concerned about the cybersecurity of our municipalities as it relates to elections, but also as it relates to you guys having tons of citizen information and data and networks that we need to keep secure. And we'll talk about in a little bit about all the things you can do that cost a gajillion dollars, because of course all of you have a gajillion dollars in surplus taxpayer funds. But what we're talking about today is actually free and needs a little technical expertise, yes, but it is also a much bigger return on investment, we think, and we wanted to help walk you through it because we've all been through this process and would like to share our lessons learned. So welcome and thank you for being here, and I hope to get to know some of you better. I would encourage you, if you're comfortable with your hair today, to turn on your camera so I can actually see you and get some audience feedback. I am a former classroom teacher, and I really do like to read the room. And in this case, the room is a bunch of flat Stanleys, including me, talking at you, and it's hard to be connected. So if I can see you, I'm a lot better. And if I say something that gets you nodding vigorously, I'll know I've struck a nerve or not. So thank you for that. And again, if you haven't showered or your room is a disaster, don't feel obliged. I'm literally coming to you from my bedroom. So hence the background is a savior right now. So why are we here? First of all, who are we? We are Ocean. To dispel some confusion right off the bat, our name is pronounced Ocean, like the ocean, like the state, like 2/3 of the planet. We're not egotistical enough to say that we're like 2/3 of the planet, but that is how you say our name. We get Ocean a lot, Ocean sometimes, but we're Ocean. It's an acronym. You don't need to know it. You don't want to know it, but that's how it's pronounced. Actually, there's the acronym right there. Don't bother. So who are we in brief? We are the state and Southeastern Massachusetts nonprofit internet and cloud services provider. And that only barely encapsulates what we do. We do have a ton of fiber around the state. In fact, if you look, the pink on that picture right there is our network. And we have 160 plus members hanging off of that network, community anchor institutions from all various verticals. Our charter is to provide internet to the public sector, nonprofits. Dave's going to correct me if I miss something here, of healthcare, higher ed, of course, K-12, and municipalities. We have currently, I think, 13 of the 39 municipalities in the state as members. We would encourage you, with your bucket of surplus taxpayer funds, to consider joining Ocean if you would like to, but we are not here to make a sales pitch. We are here to support the community, and that's why we're doing this, because it's in everyone's interest for us to be secure. And that is really literally no blowing smoke. That's our driving principle, is to be here for the community and the state. And we really feel strongly about that. We are member driven. I think of us like a credit union or like a YMCA, right? The big ones, the big internet providers might be like Gold's Gym, but we're more like the Y. We're community based, and we have lots of other wraparound services besides just internet. We have security offerings. We have on-net offerings like backup and recovery and disaster recovery and business continuity. We have peering with various big clouds. We do a lot of stuff, and we have a lot of really talented engineers and technologies in our mix of service offerings. So I would encourage you to learn more about what Ocean does, because we're not just another ISP. We're actually we're here to help, and we're a REN. So a REN is a research and education network. We are not a unicorn, right? There's someone in Kansas, they have one called the CanRen, and they were like, people don't know that there are other ones like us around the country. And in fact, it's true. There are a bunch of different research and education networks. Some nations have them nationwide. They call them an NREN, right? It's a whole nation's worth. We have basically state and regional RENs that are stitched together, and we are stitched together like a quilt. And guess what our organization is called? It is called The Quilt. We are really proud to be one of these RENs, and we're obviously not one of the larger ones. California's and Michigan's and others dwarf us by a lot, but we punch above our weight, and we are really excited to be part of this community and excited about the services we can offer both for free and for some actual internet fees. So that's the Ocean pitch, right? That's who we are. We are Ocean. We are here to help. The reason for today is email security. This came out of talking to Jen and our communications friends around what can we do to help the community that's easy. And one thing that occurred to me is I'm a former K-12 tech director. I used to be in Warwick as the tech director for Warwick schools. I understand what it's like to be inside a municipality and try and plug all these holes. And one thing I wrestled with for literally years was this email security concept of how do we configure our domain to be secure. And I eventually wrote up a document about it to share with my peers in the K-12 space, but all of it is widely applicable to anybody who manages an email platform and a domain. And so it occurred to me that we could share this with you all. And then as it happened, Kim inside of Ocean had been wrestling with the same thing. And we finally, not too long ago, turned up a bunch of these services and have started to see the benefits. And so Kim is really going to talk to the technical piece because she's the one who has been turning all the knobs and twiddling the levers. But I'm here to talk a little more high level about what this is and why we're doing it. So right there at the top is why we're doing it primarily. And this is not a hypothetical for some of our poor munis and K-12s in this state, right? Ransomware is real, and it's not a matter of if it's going to happen to you, it's a matter of when it's going to happen to you. And I don't mean to spread a lot of fear here, but there's been significant money laid out in this state around ransomware attacks and data breaches. And there's been a lot of pain and a lot of heartache over things that could have been, frankly, avoided. And it's a game of probabilities, right? So we think about it in terms of our data getting encrypted, but really it's a lot more about, in terms of municipalities, it's a lot about trust, right? And it's a lot about your, the data that you hold for your citizens. So, and the fact that you have cybersecurity actually makes you a bigger target, or cybersecurity insurance rather, makes you a bigger target, not a smaller one, because they know you're going to pay. And in fact, the data shows that munis pay, local governments pay maybe 10 times the usual ransom because they can, and because they often have no choice. Sometimes they do though, and that's the goal, is to give you more choice ultimately. But the cost isn't just monetary, right? It's your reputation, and the crooks are getting more and more clever every year. So there are some low-hanging fruit that you can do to fix this besides installing massively, expensive endpoint security platforms. So the point I make with municipalities is you're not going out of business, right? If a company gets breached and their reputation is destroyed, they can just be over, right? But the town of Exeter or the town of Warwick is not going to just end, right? Things must go on. The state of Rhode Island must go on, but trust can be eroded. And you work really hard to maintain that trust with your citizens and with your constituents. But you need to control your reputation, and you need to control that by making sure that your name, the seal of your town or city, is trustworthy, right? And we do that traditionally on paper with lots of seals. Think about notary publics or embossed things or special deed paper or whatever, right? We do that because we want this to be trusted as an official document of the municipality. But how do we do that with email? And the answer is we do that with the email security we're talking about. And in fact, we can go a layer beyond that with this, and we can say, we can get reports on who is actually trying to breach that trust and spoof our name, our good name as a municipality. So we think this is a really strong thing to do because it enables you to control your digital reputation, like you control your physical and your governmental service reputation. So, and obviously there's a cost benefit analysis to this, right? You spend a little time up front securing your systems and securing your emails, and you are chipping away at the odds that a ransomware attack or an identity theft attack or a credential theft attack is going to get through. It's not a game you win. It's not something that you're like, did that, cleaned up, I'm done with cybersecurity, right? It is a game that it is a race you're always running, I should say. Whoops. And a lot of the things you can do cost time and money, right? So I listed a few here that we all know about, hopefully, whether it's backups or endpoint security or training or using services that are secure like VPNs and not RDP, remote desktop. requiring two-factor authentication, which Kim has also recently done for us, where we have Duo. Every time we log in, we have to tap an additional authentication. I keep doing that, sorry. The thing that I wanted to emphasize, and this just occurred to me this morning, I just modified this slide, is what we're talking about here is free. It is no charge for anybody. Anybody who runs an email environment can do these changes we're talking about, and they will ultimately enable you to know who is trying to spoof your name, your domain, and stop that, which is pretty big. So we're going to get into a little bit of how we do that, but I just want you to take away that the DNS-based email security settings we're talking about today do require some technical chops for sure. And so you might need to go to your IT department or to your consultants and say, I need your help with this. And you need to know how to get into your DNS environment too, which can sometimes be a bit of a challenge, but it's worth it. It is so worth it in terms of the payoff of being in control. Imagine getting a weekly report of who is sending email as you and whether or not they're allowed to do it. And then being able to tell other recipients to reject those emails as spam or fraud or phishing because they're not real, because they are not the official stamped, embossed, special deed paper version of your email from your town. That's the end point. That's where we want to get to. It's not something you're going to be able to achieve tomorrow necessarily, but in the coming slides, Kim is going to talk to you about checking to see what you do have now. And we're going to give you a couple ways to do that. So we're going to take some time to allow you to do a check and then report back, ask questions. So far, I have made this completely zero interaction, but what we want is for folks to unmute and open up their cameras a bit in the coming bit and talk to us a bit more about what you're finding or what you've already done and what you know, because I know different people are in different places in this journey. So let's talk about configuring email security and sender policy framework. And I'm going to hand it over to Kim Kronoyer, who is going to take it from here.
Hi, thank you, Doug. Good morning, everybody. So when we're talking about the email security, as Doug mentioned, there are a few simple steps. It's a simple process. It may not be necessarily easy, but it's a simple process. There's 3 steps. Creating an SPF record in your DNS zone. And basically, an SPF record is going to state that these people or servers are validated or authorized to send mail on your behalf. So if you do not use any third-party tools like a Constant Contact or a MailChimp or anything like that, Office 365, it would just be your server, and it's a very simple text record, as you can see at the bottom, V equals SPF1, and then you put the necessary syntax in there to allow emails through. That record is the beginning of helping to authenticate who can send on your behalf and also to begin to weed out some phishing attempts. But the people that send phishing emails are pretty smart, so they've found a way to work around SPF. So the second part of this, this equation is, oh, sorry, forgot about the interaction. This is the seventh inning stretch here. So Doug is going to put that link into the chat. If you simply click on that link and put your domain, which for us would be ocean.org, whatever your domain is, just put that in to the checker and see if it comes back with any information about an SPF record.
And this is your email domain, right? Whatever your emails come from your municipality, not necessarily your website. For some of you, it's the same, but for some of you, I found out it is not.
Did you want to wait for results, or should we?
I do. I would like some folks to report back. My experience is, my expectation is here is that most everybody has at least a rudimentary SPF record that says, yes, we're allowed to send from Google
I'm on a
or
training.
Microsoft.
I'm not being antisocial.
It's okay. It's okay, Jill. You're still here. But if anybody has results from this, screen check or otherwise, I'd be curious to know what you are finding about your.
Oh, Chris Pancaro. Hi, Chris. How are you? Haven't seen you in a while. He's just offered that they did not find any problems with the SPF record for his town, which is great. Jill reports back that there's no record.
Interesting. Sometimes I will point out that not finding problems with an SPF record doesn't necessarily mean that it is a comprehensive SPF record. It means it's well formed, right? And it processes well. There are no errors in its syntax, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's encompassing all of the systems that are allowed to send mail as you, right? Yes, Burrowville's good. Looks like, Susan, you're missing that closing tilde all on your SPF record, which we'll talk about in a second. Right? Do we have a slide on that, Kim? Proper
right,
syntax?
Back
Yeah.
one. If you go back one, you've got the example of an SPF record.
Yeah.
Yep.
Hey, Marty.
And I will say, Susan, I went through like six or seven iterations of my SPF record before I got it to process correctly. And it's not the kind of thing that you necessarily can see right away. You can do but you can do a record checker and a syntax checker before you publish it on sites like these to help you get it right, because it is pretty finicky. But you can see in this record here, there's a tilde all at the end. That just means basically if something doesn't match this, still let it through. If you do a dash all, it would actually deny anything that doesn't match this SPF record, which is a little risky. So most people don't recommend doing that, but putting that tilde all at the end is good. All right, shall we move on?
Sure. Thank you, everybody who sent your responses in.
Don't step away from your keyboards. We're gonna do more of this.
Okay, so step 2 in securing your email is creating DKIM keys, and DKIM secures your email, and it's nothing that you can see with the naked eye. If I send myself an email at my personal account, the email comes in, I see it's from my work account, but when you look at the source behind that email, you'll see a DKIM signature, and that shows once you've created DKIM keys and you've published them into your DNS zone, it will validate. It's another step to validate that the email is being sent and verified from, in this case, ocean.org. Now, it's easy to set up, but I just want to mention, and I think Doug mentions this on the next slide, every email provider has some different steps. So we're not going to tell you how to create the record. You can go to whoever your email provider is. We have Office 365. There are a number of articles that I went in and followed, created. They actually create the keys, and I copied them and put them into our DNS zone. And just mentioning that as an Ocean member, we have a managed DNS service. It's through NS1, and it's something, if you are a member and you want to discuss having hosted your DNS hosted, that's another service that we have.
Yeah.
Just throwing it out there. So DKIM is the second step. It offers another level of authentication, validation, and showing that, yes, this is a valid domain. This came from ocean.org. And if you want
I think of this is really the closest equivalent to putting the sort of town seal or using special, on counterfeitable paper, anti-counterfeit, substrate, because no one can really spoof your DKIM signature. It's based on this public key encryption, which if you don't share your private key, nobody else can sign their emails the way you can sign your emails. So it's another layer of security. So as you may have guessed, we have a checker for you. I think I got the link right here. I'm going to put it into the chat. So this one's a little bit more involved, right, Kim? How does this test work?
This, you are going to send it. It's going to prompt you to send an email to a particular email address on the screen. And then when you'll see the results, and what you're going to see is actually the source, which is what's behind the scenes when you receive an email. And it's going to tell you whether it was, I believe it's successful, that the DKIM is in place and it's found, or there's no DKIM present. Now, again, your email is still going to work. What this will do, when you do get to the point of adding a DKIM, the DKIM records, it's just going to validate it. So if I decided to send an email as somebody from, the town of Burrowville, from my little email server in my basement, which I don't really have, but just for this scenario.
I like the picture.
Yeah, it's like, it wouldn't go through if DKIM was in place, because it would say, oh no, this is not valid, it's not signed, or, the encryption that takes place to
Right.
validate.
Well,
behind the
and what would
scenes.
really happen is whatever spam score it's given would go up because it wasn't able to be validated as from the exeter.ri.com or whatever the address is.
Mhm.
And all of this is what they're doing, is they're sort of adding to the score and to the evaluation of an email and saying, does this belong in spam or flagged as phishing or whatever, or not. So this one's going to take a moment because it takes a minute for the emails to go through. But if you're able to generate that test email address on this site, then you can just copy paste that, send it from your town email, from your municipal email. So it comes from that address. I've found that fewer people have DKIM set up than SPF. Not no one. There are quite a few out there. This is possibly the most technical thing to set up of all of these three that we're talking about. And it's hard for us to instruct because it is so different for each provider. I've done it for 365 and for Google, and it does take a little bit of chops, but it's nowhere near, the level you need to like set up a VMware environment or a backups or anything like that. It's just a little more technical. And again, like Susan discovered, a little finicky in the syntax. Sometimes you can get yourself into trouble with that. But the end result is what you should see, hopefully, is a bunch of passes there at the bottom, like we see on this slide. And you're actually going to even get a little preview of what your DMARC situation is there if you care to know. But what we're looking for is a DKIM of pass, which means that you do have a certificate there and you are signing your emails. And if you don't have that, I would suggest either you, if you've got the credentials, or somebody in your tech department, go and look into setting that up. And what we're going to provide you with later is the document that I wrote up that is sort of a one-stop shop for getting through all of these steps and where to go for resources, which I wrote because I didn't find anything like it out there. And it's a bit of a slog if you're, like Kim has discovered, if you're Googling and trying to figure this out yourself. There aren't that many single points to go to. So
And
anybody have any? Sorry.
No, I was just going to add that this whole process, I kept attempting to do it. I had my SPF records set up and I was like, I've really got to get to the DKIM and the DMARC, get those records set up. But every time, as Doug mentioned, I go and I look for information, and this public and private key encryption, in some ways, it was a little daunting, a little overwhelming. How is this going to work? And most importantly, I think I was afraid of breaking my email. And I'm just going to give kudos here, Doug. When Doug sent me that paper that he wrote, I read through it, and he breaks it down and steps through and removes that, the mystifying part of setting all of this up. And it was, to me, a very straightforward process. There are links to other resources as needed, depending on what type of email domain you have. But Doug has a link in this presentation. He's going to share that document. I think it's a great place to launch from and you can get all of this created and feel pretty, feel very confident that it's in place and, it'll work to provide you with reporting at the end, which is the last step.
Yeah, I wasn't there to reinvent the wheel and give a step-by-step instruction on how to do all this. That's been done out there. I was just trying to create that stitched together resource and explain that the expectations are this is iterative, right? You don't get this on the first pass. You don't get DMARC reports back telling you who's spoofing your emails in a week. It takes a little bit of time to get there, but once you're there, you're there. And now you're able to improve upon it. So Justin's got a result. Anyone else have any results to share with us on hopefully you should see an SPF of pass. Maybe you see a DKIM of pass as well. Obviously you don't have to do it right now if you're wanting to do it offline. Ooh, nice. The league passed. Should call yourselves the Justice League. Just saying, it's free marketing. I was thinking, Kim, if we take this on the road, DKIM is actually our presenter pairing name. Yeah.
I've got my headphones on. I'm ready.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's move on. But if you're not doing this, or if you're not comfortable doing this, definitely refer your IT folks to it, because they would probably want to know. I know Justin does municipal and schools over there in Burrillville. So he'll be able to, in one fell swoop, maybe improve some of the security on their domains. All right, shall we move on, Kim?
Yes.
We talked about configuring a little bit. We shouldn't belabor this because it does get kind of technical, but it really is right there in the admin settings of Outlook 365, Office 365 rather. And it's also in the email, advanced email settings of Google G Suite. And they do, those two walk you through it really well. The challenge then is transferring the keys that you generate into your DNS record, which again varies by DNS host. So that's why we can't like tell you exactly how to do this. But
And just to mention that these 3 steps all tie into your domain, your DNS. And for those, there's a lot of acronyms being shared here today. The DNS that we're talking about is what is your particular town or your domain has records, a zone out on the internet, public internet that allows people, if I want to get to the town of Burrillville webpage, or I want to send an email to the town of Burrillville, from my computer, how does it know to get to that server? And the domain, the DNS, the public DNS is that bridge. It translates and it locates the correct servers and sends the information where it needs to go. I mean, that's very low level description, but just so that you're not a little overwhelmed if you've never heard of that term and how does that fit in. It's another piece to the puzzle, but again, pretty easy and it can be accomplished with all of these parts. And we're here to help if you have questions.
More than happy, mostly because I don't want people to go through the same pain that Kim and I went through in slogging through this setup. It really doesn't have to be a months long process. Like I said, it won't be tomorrow, but it doesn't have to be a real slog. And we should say that the next step we're getting to requires the first 2 to be set up, right? So if you haven't done SPF, and DKIM, get those tucked first, because now we're going to talk about the payoff, which is DMARC.
So this is the part that ties everything together. And it is, again, another DNS record that needs to be created. And in the DMARC record, you're going to set your policy. And if you set it to none, it's going to be in monitor mode. As part of this process of setting up this record, you want to set up a place for a report to be sent. In Doug's document that he suggests Postmark was where we went to create a free account. They have all of this information sent to them. They analyze it, parse it, and send it back in a very pretty report, which you'll see on the next screen. Right. So every week it sends that report out, and then we start going through and tweaking what we need to the SPF record and get everything aligned so we know valid senders are using our service. And eventually we're going to move to the quarantine and or the reject. Which is going to say, if this isn't from us and we haven't validated it, don't accept it. So.
Well, if I could say, the important thing to note here is that DMARC doesn't just help you know what to do with emails. It helps everyone receiving an email from you to know what to do with those emails, right? So DMARC is the final step in them saying, okay, well, you failed SPF and you failed DKIM, but I know it's from northkingstownri.org or whatever. What do I do with it now? Like, do I send it along? If it doesn't pass, do I let it go through? Do I quarantine it? Do I reject it outright? And you're basically telling other email recipients how to treat your emails if they look spoofed, right? Which is a superpower to me. It's like heretofore we're controlling the email that we have, right? We're controlling our email server, what we send out, what we take in, and we score it as spam or phishing or whatever. But now we're able to tell other email providers and recipients what to do with email if it looks from us, like if it looks bad, if it looks maybe fraudulent, which is again protecting our reputation, right? It's the equivalent of us saying, if you get a fraudulent seal on this deed for this property, reject it, right? Tell us, and we'll go after that person, and we'll make sure that is deeded appropriately. Same thing for the email. And what they do is when they receive it and they have a DMARC report, they say we found one. They send it back to you, to an address that you specify. So now you basically got this network of surveillance out there telling you when an email from you looks wrong. which is a really great feedback loop because now you can start to tighten your perimeter around what emails you allow and what you don't allow. For me, what happened is when I started getting these DMARC reports back, I suddenly realized, oh, I forgot about that other system that sends emails as warwickschools.org, right? I forgot I configured that thing. I forgot the copiers send email. I forgot we have a phone system that sends emails, right? And I started to build my SPF records to include them because they were authorized. They were my systems. I just didn't remember that they were sending emails as warwickschools.org. So as I did that and I built the stable of authorized providers, what I'm also doing is saying anyone outside of this is almost certainly not authorized. And that's where you want to get to. And that's what DMARC helps you get to is pulling that perimeter in to eventually, the goal is you're rejecting everything that isn't authorized. You're rejecting things that fail DKIM and or SPF, which is to say, you're telling those senders, ignore what is clearly fraud. And right there, talk about probability, right there, you've just reduced the probability of your citizens or industries or businesses receiving emails purporting to come from you saying, you owe this tax money, pay us now, use this account, and getting defrauded in some way, or having their credentials stolen, or whatever the case is, because the crooks like to trade on your good name. I mean, look what they've done with the Department of Labor, right, in the unemployment fraud. They have taken those identities and they have defrauded a government agency, and that's the nightmare there, that you really don't want to happen, and you don't want to be the source of that data either. So as Kim explained, the score that you get from the DKIM and the SPF checks then gets factored into what does the DMARC do with it, right? Or what happens to that email afterwards. So it's somewhat convoluted when you set it up, but the ultimate experience is we'll show you get a report that looks kind of like this, right? Here's how many emails were sent. Here's how many were aligned with SPF or DKIM, and here's how many were not. And this is actionable information that you can use to take this red number down and get this green number as close to 100% as possible. Everything that's coming from your Muni is authenticated and authorized and not spoofed. It didn't seem possible a few years ago, but it really is. And that's what I want to impress upon everyone is you really can take back this control of your email reputation. But let's go back here, because guess what? We have another checker for you. And I'm going to copy paste this into the chat. If I can, hold on a second. There we go. So this one's more straightforward than the DKIM one. This one is simply just a DMARC record check. Again, you put in your domain and it'll tell you not just if you have it, but what level you're at.
So while they're doing that, Doug, I'd like to just make one point on the slide before this, if I could.
Oh, sorry.
That's quite all right. So I copied and pasted some source from an email down in the left-hand corner. Now this is more that you're the recipient of a phishing email. Okay, so what happens if you have an SPF record in place, or if any person who phishes has their SPF record in place? If you notice here in this email, the mail from field is fish@phishing.contoso.com. That domain is valid. So SPF checks the mail from field. And now this isn't your SPF, but this is just your server checking the validity of an email being sent to you. If you have just if SPF is the only check in place, it's going to pass and it'll get through. It's sending in, but the real field, the from field, is Woodgrove Bank Security. That's the part that a recipient is going to see. You're not going to see the mail from field. So having DMARC in place will validate whether or not this is a phishing email by saying, is this Woodgrove Bank? Is this phishing.contoso.com? Are they a valid sender for woodgrovebank.com? Having all three of these pieces in place would catch that as a phishing email. Yeah. But having one, it may get through. So as Doug was saying, each step that you take, you tighten it down a little more, you tighten it down a little bit more. So this is just, again, how it'll look if somebody tries sending on Azure domain. If you have all of these pieces in place, the email will be rejected eventually. It'll get rejected because it's not from you. It's not a valid email. Thanks, Don.
This is a perfect example of why SMTP is a legacy protocol that was never designed to be secure and is kind of garbagey, and why we're bolting all of these other things onto it to make it more secure, right? All of these DNS things are basically hacks on SMTP and mail protocol in order to help it be trustworthy, because inherently it was not. It was designed back in the 70s or earlier even, I think, and they were not thinking this way before. So how are we doing? Anybody want to be brave and raise their hand or speak up about their DMARC check results? Anybody get a red check even? We got a red check. Red check from Christopher, which means you've got DMARC, but you're not necessarily all the way to reject, which honestly, I don't think I've ever seen anyone have a reject DMARC record. Greg, have you gotten to reject status? Yeah.
Yeah, we ran under the monitoring portion of it for about a year, and then we flipped over to reject. So we've been running reject now for the past year and a half, and it helps. It helps out a lot.
Reject is risky if you don't do what Greg just said, right? Run it for a while and see and get some time experience and number of emails out there. But it is the ultimate in this DNS email security. All right, anyone else? Any other red checks out there? Or not? It's okay to not. I'm surprised when I see a DMARC record when I check, especially a public sector email domain. Not a lot of folks have gotten there yet, and that's okay. That's why we're here. And I get that a lot of this for some of you might seem a little bit like, whoa, this is a lot, and this is DNS, and this is tricky. And I would encourage you to not walk away and say, I'll deal with that later, right? Get started anyway. Start the conversation and start making this a background task that you sort of like gardening. Maybe it's like DNS gardening, right? You plant something, you wait for it to grow a little bit, you come back, you maintain it, because it does pay off. Postmark is free. Postmark costs nothing for the basics. I did upgrade in more to DMARCian, which is a paid service for a few $100 a year for a little more granular data. But honestly, Postmark's report were very helpful, and I didn't get a ton more out of DMARCian, mostly because I didn't like the way they reported the data. Postmark just lets you set up a free address. So, Kim, you want to talk through this slide a little bit, and then we'll get to what I should have said, obviously, is that Greg is here not to talk email security, but to talk .gov. So Greg, next up is going to be Greg talking about the .gov top-level domain and why you need it. But let's finish up with DMARC first, and then we'll go on to Greg's section.
Sure. So just briefly, what next? Like I have this report, so I'm getting reports weekly. How do I now rectify these and get them aligned? So I did find a site, and that update SPF/DKIM is a hyperlink to a site that helps you to align valid senders. There's a lot of information there. It'll show you, there are actually some links to how to align MailChimp and a few others. So you want to, if you can't find a procedure on how to do it online, then you need to go to your third-party sender, possibly Constant Contact or a company like that, and say, I need to get this aligned. Can you provide the DNS records that I need? So you may have to do a little digging there. You're going to follow the instructions, continue to review that report weekly to make sure that the things you fixed are actually fixed. And very briefly, an example of, if you can see over to the left, the AmazonSES.com is the DKIM is 100% aligned for us, but the SPF it isn't. So I just yesterday, I was going through some of this documentation. I got the information, and I've added include AmazonSES.com. So I went ahead and I added that to my record. I published my record, and then I validated it. If that was, and it did validate okay. So on Monday, I'll get my next report, and I'm going to see, how this how this worked. So
Yeah.
this part is probably, I know we've talked about a lot of things in setting it up. It's actually a pretty straightforward process. I think monitoring the report and making the changes and making sure you understand who's sending on your behalf is going to probably take a little more time, but it's okay. It's worth it because you're securing your email to the best way that you can at this point. And this is all free, as Doug mentioned.
What you're going to see ultimately at the bottom of this DMARC digest report is a bunch of rando weird email senders who are the spoofers, right? And almost everybody's going to have some. And that will be an interesting look at who is trying to be you and who is trying to defraud your constituents or anybody who might take an email from you seriously. So that's kind of sobering too, because I had not a few in warwickschools.org, which, like, who really cares about spoofing warwickschools.org? Apparently a lot of people, because there were a lot of emails out there that were fraudulently trying to be us. But I couldn't have known. I never would have known had I not set up this DMARC service. And I thought that was kind of cool. I felt a little smart. Not a lot smart, but a little smart. Okay, should we move on?
Yes.
So, okay, by the way, we should have said we are going to share these slides. There's a links document right here, which is the one that I wrote, that you'll clearly see is in my voice because it's silly sometimes, but it's also meant to be supportive and not scary, right? And to make this seem doable, because it is doable and it is important. And it walks you through all of these steps. And here again, Ocean is here. We have some formidable engineering talent. I am not among it, right? I'm on the member services team. Kim is the one who does the technical stuff, and our engineering side is the one who configure our network. We are more than happy to support you in keeping your environment secure, whether you're a member or not, where we'd like to be that resource for you. Obviously, we'd love it if you became a member, because we have a whole ton of other security services, including Cisco Umbrella, that we can offer. But your security is everybody's security, basically. We all have a vested interest as a state in being secure. So that's why we're here. So after this, we'll send out the link to this presentation, and you can get all the checker links that we had before, but also get into this document. Okay, now it's the Greg show. Greg, you've done a lot with .gov, so tell us about it, because I think I'm going to learn something here too.
Thanks, Doug, and thank you, Ocean, for inviting me to participate today. For those of you that don't know who I am, my name's Greg Crancher. I work for the Rhode Island Department of State, otherwise known as the Secretary of State. And Doug and Ocean has asked me to speak about the .gov domains. So for those of you that have not had your coffee yet this morning, don't worry about that. This exciting topic will surely get you awake. Before I start, one thing I just want to add in regards to DMARC. I know it's difficult to look at DMARC's explanation and what it does and try and rationalize the effort that it takes to enable it with the benefit that you get, because it's really tough to try and come up with a good reason to invest the time with it. But if you look at it from this perspective, if every legitimate company, if every mail server and domain set DMARC up, there would be no more illegitimate mail. You know, and that's like the big picture. But we need everyone to do it. Individuals doing it isn't enough to really see the added benefit.
Are you saying it's like the vaccine of email security,
yes.
Greg?
Yeah. But you need herd immunity. That's the.
I got it.
That's the goal.
All right. Way to be topical.
Yes. All right. So .gov. What is a .gov domain? So top level domains, otherwise known as TLDs, they represent the rightmost segment of a domain address. So that's the .gov section. And who manages those? ICANN, which is the Internet Corporation for Assigned Names and Numbers. They are responsible for managing all the TLDs, or most of them. They're split up into different categories. You have your generic TLDs, which is the .com, and that's open to everyone. They can include almost any combination and format in the name as long as it does not conflict with the restricted TLDs. Now, the restricted TLDs are split out into two sections. You have your sponsored TLDs, which cover your .gov and .mil domains. Those are for government and military use only. And then you have your generic restricted TLDs, which are .biz for registered businesses and .name for individuals. And then you also have country code TLDs, like .us. Those are reserved for countries and territories only. You have your infrastructure TLDs, which are used by the Internet Engineering Task Force, or IETF. For example, like .arpa, which I'm sure no one has ever seen. Those are used for technical activities. And then you have your reserved TLDs, which are technically your non-public facing ones, like .local, which you would use for like your internal domain. So that covers that. Next slide, Doug. So why do you need a .gov domain? So for basically, they do provide a much higher level of security than you get with all the others. You have to go through a verification and authorization process to get one. And this can vary depending on your agency type. There's different stipulations. States will have their own rules based on who the point of contacts are and so forth. Your domain registration information for anyone who's ever registered a regular .com or any other one, they usually charge you to try and hide that information. It's just another way to try and get more money. But when you register, you provide a name, an address, a phone number, all these detailed information in regards to who registered it. And that typically ends up becoming public information. For .gov addresses, that's all hidden. You don't have to pay extra for it. It's just part of the service. And for the management accounts that you set up, those are required to have multi-factor auth enabled on them. So you, right off the bat, to manage the accounts, which is probably one of the biggest gray areas for just registering a regular .com address. If you don't protect that, it's trivial if someone gains access to it to just point it to another DNS zone that they're in control of.
Yeah.
And you would never know. They would just copy it and then they slowly just make changes, and you're kind of just oblivious to it. This protects that. It also helps remove the threat of typo squatting, which essentially is if someone obtains a domain that's similar to what you have, that can create like a replica site for using for misinformation or for phishing, etc., anything like that. It also allows you to advertise your official site as a .gov site, which is a huge deal. It makes it much easier for people to identify your official site and to identify unofficial sites. The registration is for 1 year. You can't purchase more than that currently. The cost is $400 per registration year, and though CISA, the agency working on that, is currently trying to lower that cost. So, but right now that's the cost for it. The domain is also monitored for violation of requirements, such as illegal use. So that's another added bonus if an agency for some reason had some malicious intent and was able to legitimately get a .gov site. If they weren't following the rules and regulations of it, the site would be terminated. And also, when you set it up, they do by default have HSTS enabled, although you can disable that. HSTS is HTTP Strict Transport Security. It basically just forces an overall view of your domain to use HTTPS. It stops you from having to redirect like port 80 to port 443 on your website. It just tells the browser by default when it's accessing your sites, it should always use HTTPS, which makes it more secure. So you can disable that if you need to, but it's a nice feature that they will have turned on by default for you initially when you set it up.
Ready?
Okay.
Next slide.
Yep. Okay. So .gov domains, they are they're managed by CISA that I mentioned earlier. They are the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. This agency obviously is extremely secure because they have security in their name twice. So what could go wrong? But CISA is managed by the Department of Homeland Security. They're a sub-agency under them. Their primary focus is on protecting the .gov network, which basically is federal and government agencies, as well as SLTTs, state, local, tribal, and territory agencies. CISA recently took over the management of the .gov domains. There was another agency that was that had been managing it ever since it's been brought online. And they are working to try and make it easier for state and federal agencies to obtain that address. And that involves in the authorization process. We personally have gone through it for purchasing a .gov address, and it was rather difficult, but municipalities' paths are not as difficult as state agencies in Rhode Island. But that's their goal. Their goal is to make sure that every state, local, and tribal territorial agency uses the .gov address, which it just makes misinformation handling and keeping sites secure much easier. So
I know your big boss, Nellie Gorbea, would really love it if all of our munis had a .gov.
Yes,
address.
that's
the dream.
Secretary Gorbea is definitely high on.
Yeah.
It's just another tick in the box to try and make everything more secure.
Right. Is it hard to migrate to a .gov if you've got an existing like Susan? I'm assuming you have a .org right now. I know I did in Warwick schools. I don't know if a school can get a .gov, but I know a municipality can. But is it hard to do that switch?
Not really.
Once you got it.
I mean, once you own the domain, whoever you're using for your DNS provider, you basically would just point that domain in the configuration area on the CISA site to whoever you're managing with DNS, and you have the opportunity to just kind of slowly bring sites up in parallel with your current sites, and you can just flip at your leisure. There's a lot of different ways you can handle it. You can post information, make a big campaign out of it. You can just slowly start to point and redirect requests to your old site to your new site. So that it is very easy, and you have full control over how and when you want to do that.
Probably the hardest part, you've got to get all new stationery and printed materials, and wherever the website appears, you've got to change it.
Yes, yeah, well, lots of updates, I'm sure.
Yeah, but I mean, it's the effective equivalent in the domain space and the website space of the email security we've been talking about, where it's just additional checks and layers that make it a lot less probable that someone can spoof your website, or your even like you said, typo squat on a domain and change one letter.
Exactly. Yeah, because you can't. I mean, you could create a site with one of those other top level domain zones, but it wouldn't be a .gov address.
Right.
You couldn't get a .gov address and try and spoof any of the legitimate sites. So, and that's really the goal there is, you're able to tell your constituents that, hey, look, as long as you see that .gov at the end of the domain, you're good. You don't have to worry about the site. You don't have to think if this is the wrong site. That's where you should be.
Like a club.
Yes.
Not everyone can get in.
No, you need to know somebody.
Feel special. Yeah.
If
So
anyone
I don't know what municipalities folks here represent, but does anybody already have a .gov domain? It's funny because if you put in the chat, you can put in if you're a .gov or a .org. I'm curious. Somebody responded to our survey and said, we were trying to get, Exeter.gov, but it's a whole thing. I was like, there's so much is contained. Multitudes are contained, and it's a whole thing. And that's, I think, exactly what CISA is trying to reduce the friction of, right? Is acquiring that .gov domain.
Yes.
Yeah. And tell me, Greg, what's the difference? Can municipalities get a .ri.gov? Do they want one? What's the difference there?
So RI.gov is currently owned by the state DOA, and do it manage that. You can ask for an RI.gov address. You would have to go to the state and ask them for it. I don't believe they would turn you down for it, but they're not looking to manage that. So
Right.
they would prefer that you get your own .gov
Right.
address. But if you would rather have an RI.gov address, I mean, you're more than capable of asking for it from the state. So
Oh, good. Looks like North Kingstown is in the process of switching over. That's great.
that's awesome.
Elizabeth and Hopkinton, do you know if you guys have even talked about switching over to .gov, or Narragansett? Daniel's already there. All right, legislature.gov. Well, fine then. There's a flex. Oh, good. All right. So there seems to be an awareness switching over
Yeah,
to
that's great.
.gov. I think Warwick already has a .gov too. I don't think East Greenwich does though. I think we need to get on that over down here.
I think Mike in Jamestown has it as well.
Mm-hmm. To me, it's also about taking down your blood pressure as an IT manager, or the third parties who's managing it. It's like, you're just that much more protected from fraudsters, and they are out there. How many? Brian Tardif was saying, how many hits do the Rhode Island State network get? Penetration attempts on a daily basis. It was something like 63 million.
Yeah.
Right? Port scans and attempts and everything else. Like, there's a reason they call it a firewall. There's literally on the other side a conflagration of criminality going on that you need to be protected from. It's kind of crazy, and it's sort of invisible until it isn't.
Yes, that is true.
All right. Well, I'm conscious that we're at time. We're over time. Thank you all for hanging in. If you have questions, you know how to reach us. We can send around a follow-up email, Jen, right, with our emails and also the links to the slides and that document. And feel free to pass those on. None of this is private or confidential. We'd like these to end up in the hands of people who can do stuff with them and can move things forward. And we're more than happy to assist with that. And we're more than happy to talk about other wraparound security services you might want and help you find those resources, whether it's in Ocean or somewhere else. My personal goal is by 2022, I want to see us be a lot more secure in these municipal networks. I think it's really important, and libraries as well. Susan, I don't want to leave you guys out. The libraries are a hotspot of activity, and we've been doing a lot of work with the wireless there. Ocean has as well, but when you open up a public Wi-Fi network, you also open yourself up to even more, nefarious actors. So we want to be conscious of your security and everyone's. Dave, you want to take us out?
Sure. It strikes me, obviously, that this is a snippet of the overall problem of securing, your environments. So this was on, email security, and there are so many other security topics, that face the municipalities. That, I'm wondering if everybody is interested in advancing the concept of getting together, and I don't want to speak for the League of Cities and Towns, but it's certainly a great organizing body. It has the right, certainly the right title, to have a more organized and systemic method for attacking the problems that we all face in this area. And so just looking, maybe Jennifer, we have a little bit more discussion as we go along. If you get the kind of response from your people that might want to do things on a bit more coordinated basis, across the state, to share best practices and do those kinds of things, because we do this in other vertical markets, and we try to get our K-12s together, and we do our K-12 kind of thing and try to do the best practices shares, but we don't have one for the municipalities. And so maybe, Jennifer, we could do some kind of partnership that takes a subcommittee or something like that, that works with people like like Greg and and make sure the election piece and that kind of thing is understood. And, you know, we're tied in with Brian Tardif at the CIO's level and state level. So, you know, there's a lot more to do. And so, you know, might be something we continue if everybody's interested.
Absolutely. We would be happy to help coordinate such a thing. And I think that there's a lot of good professional associations out there, but to carve it out specifically to IT in municipalities is important. And I know it's, you know, some towns just don't have the resources. So anything we can do to share the best practices is very important. So
Sure.
happy to do that. And, you know, Doug and Namoto and I had brainstormed a few ideas, but always happy to hear more about what issues communities are having with regards to internet security and technology and so forth, and see what we can do to provide some more training, because we're happy to do that as well.
Yeah, I think the state misses the point sometimes on things like this about doing things for all 39 cities and towns at the same time, you know, and get the benefits of buying powers and things like that, to do it all together in a consistent architecture that everybody can then trade their best practices and do the same kinds of things. And in this case, I think we're missing an opportunity to do that.
Well, now is the time. We'll get started.
Sure.
Well, I would love to thank all of our speakers from Ocean and Greg from the Secretary of State's office. I think this was super informative, and we definitely got some good feedback already via the chat and some emails I've gotten. So thank you all for your information and your enthusiasm. We certainly appreciate it. And just to give a plug to some of our other trainings that are coming up, we tend to do these on Wednesdays at 10 a.m. And next week, we'll be doing a training on resilient microgrids with the Office of Energy Resources at the state and some other folks. So you can always find the schedule on our website at rileague.org under the events calendar. And signups for registration are there as well to get you the Zoom link. So again, appreciate it. And we look forward to talking more with you folks at Ocean, as well as seeing more of you folks at our training. So thank you so much.
Jennifer.
Thank you.
Now.
Thank you.
Good luck, everyone.
Thank
Stay
you.
safe. Thanks, Greg. See ya.
Take care.